The Craig Fahle Show on Deadline Detroit is made possible in part by Techtown Detroit, Detroit's entrepreneurship hub. Techtown Detroit is a business incubator and accelerator, helping tech startups and local businesses launch and grow. Techtown supports businesses with co-working, office, meeting, and event space. They also connect entrepreneurs to resources and learning and networking events in Detroit. Techtown Detroit, Detroit's entrepreneurship hub. Welcome to the week that was on Deadline Detroit. I'm Craig Fahle.
Can we
Nancy
make this?
Derringer is back once again. Thank you for being here in the coveted bimbo chair.
Yes. Can we make this an all pillow talk edition?
An all pillow talk edition of the week that
Alan
was
Allman,
on Deadline
Pillow
Detroit.
Talk.
Hi.
We know you're special.
Hi.
We appreciate you
I
being
know.
with us today.
Baby,
Alan
I
Legel
know.
is here as well.
Hey.
Or should we call him Alan Allman?
Hey, hello,
Go.
welcome to Pillow Talk.
That's right. Pillow Talk edition, special impeachment edition of Pillow Talk here on the week that was on Deadline Detroit. No, we're not going to do that. That would be really, really annoying, but we're annoying enough as it is.
No, I think a lot of
according
people
to some of the
would
mail that I
appreciate
get.
it. Okay. Oh, really?
Because, they're just saying there's nothing wrong, nothing to see here, nothing to see here. This is
Oh.
the defense for what we're seeing from the president.
Oh,
We had
my
an
God.
impeachment vote yesterday. This is a historic time, regardless of what people think about this. This is only the third time in our history. Well, fourth time. Fourth time if you think Andrew Johnson. Go back to Andrew Johnson. Of course, then you had Nixon facing an impeachment and resigning before it actually went there because he knew he was going to lose.
Yep.
Bill Clinton's impeachment, and now, of course, Donald Trump. An official inquiry, a vote was taken yesterday. Not a single Republican voted in support of this. Justin Amash, who used to be a Republican, did vote in support of this. Two Democrats defected who were in very, very Trumpian districts. So self-preservation obviously on the minds of those two. But this is a highly partisan affair. Any shock there that there was nobody? That,
Shock and awe.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's interesting. I'm getting on debates on Facebook, and I'm friends with two retired.
Talk about a waste
F-
of
F-
time.
Yes.
Yeah, by all means.
we appreciate that you're here on Facebook
Well,
watching right now.
Two
debating
retired FBI agents, and one in particular is been attacking me, which I told him he was stepping over the line a little bit. I don't mind the debate, but starts calling me a liar because I'm espousing what I'm reading in the New York Times and the Washington Post and hearing on the news, and they're both insistent that no crime has been committed. To me, it seems so obvious. I've seen, look, Blagojevich, he wanted something for that Senate seat. I mean, Trump is
You don't just give it away.
does not exchange money in exchange for favors. There's a crime that has been committed there, as far as I can see, and maybe they'll wiggle out of that. But it's interesting. And then they say, well, no crime. I mean, on the Mueller report, well, Mueller specifically said during his testimony, he said, we didn't address the issue that these were crimes because, or indictments or anything, because we couldn't. And that's debatable, but that was his outcome. And so people say, hey, he was cleared. And then William Barr, obviously, then some people, one of the agents said, well, there was a ruling on that. Well, the ruling came from William Barr, who has become maybe a step above John Mitchell in the bias as an attorney general.
Right. I was going to say that.
Redefining the role.
It's like,
Right.
I mean, the people who are left in the Trump cabinet at this point are just the dregs, and I don't think we owe John Mitchell. William Barr any kind of respect as that we would, and even
He gave it all
Jeff
up.
Sessions.
I mean, his role. I've always found the attorney generals. I mean, it's a tough position. You're an appointee of the president. You report often to the president, and yet you sometimes have to take on the president.
Right.
And so it's a very tricky position there, and it probably should be reorganized in a different way so that it's not that way. But
you lead the Justice Department. You're supposed to be the top
you're
lawyer.
the Justice Department, and
maybe-
you're supposed to go after the president if you have to. But William Barr is clearly the president's lawyer here, and he's just carrying out the president's agenda in a way that we haven't seen in quite a while.
Well, interestingly enough, though, I mean, I'm looking at the defense coming from the Republicans and from President Trump on this one. They're focused on one thing and one thing only, and that's, of course, the phone call to Zelensky.
Right.
But what they're not talking about is all the other stuff that validates that there was a quid pro quo about this, that this aid to this nation that was fighting against Russia was contingent on digging up dirt on a political opponent. It's not just about what he said on the phone call. It's every other action that has been identified in this testimony over the last couple of weeks that is now going to be public that really spells out a pretty clear case here. And it's damning. You have career diplomats, people who are appointed by the president, saying, yeah, this is what happened. And so you've got a situation now where if people are actually willing to look at the evidence, they will see that there's something wrong here. And the problem is not whether or not a crime was committed, because the House can determine whether or not they think that this is a high crime or misdemeanor.
Well, that's the other thing they're saying is the Republicans says, well, who says this is even a high crime or misdemeanor? It's like, I'm sorry. I mean,
Monica Lewinsky, that was a high crime and misdemeanor.
Yeah,
apparently.
exactly.
Now, lying under oath, that was a real thing.
Yeah, right, sure. But I mean, how is this? I just don't see how this is not a crime. I mean, it's and this is again, this is the corrosion.
Power. I mean,
it certainly is. But I mean, this is the corrosion that we're talking about here, which is, I've reached the point now where I just can't. I can't meet these people as peers in the marketplace of ideas. I mean, it's contempt. I've gone from kind of like, you're wrong to you're a bad person, and that's a dangerous place to go.
Well, that's where this country is going, and it's really dangerous. I mean, you could see that people would start literally fighting in the streets or fighting in a bar if there were arguments over. I mean, I can see it happening, and it's just percolating.
Right. Well, when you have Major League Baseball umpires tweeting about how they're going to go out and buy an assault rifle to prepare for the Civil War if Trump is removed from office, I mean, what else can you do?
Right. It's crazy. And the thing about whether it's a crime or not, I mean, again, the high crimes and misdemeanors is really not it's misinterpreted. That I think people generally think, well, we need a felony here, which I think there is one anyways, but it's really about abuse of power. It doesn't have to be per se a crime, but the question is, here is a guy which that lieutenant colonel was basically saying is that he was putting our security as a country at risk for his own benefit, and that is an abuse of power, and I think there's no question about that. But the Republicans, it's interesting, they were pointedly asked, do you see anything wrong with this? And the McCarthy dude said, no, we don't.
No, that's
and you're
the
like,
thing.
Yeah.
Okay, well, it's okay.
Okay, then.
It's certainly not okay if the Democrats were to do it, and if Hillary Clinton, oh my gosh.
Yeah, right.
If half the things that they were doing, if Hillary Clinton had Manafort as her manager,
right.
I mean, half the stuff there would have been bedlam.
Right.
Well, and I'm just wondering, what the next step is going to be. I mean, obviously you've got public hearings. There's going to be public testimony, which is, I think people will watch. I think there's enough people out there that are saying, I want to see. I want to know more about this, because obviously we haven't heard everything, but a lot of this testimony has come out. The opening statements that these people have been giving have been made public. Those in themselves are corroborating the accusations. And so they can whine about the whistleblower all they want. Who is the whistleblower? Where's the whistleblower? The whistleblower is now irrelevant because everything he pointed out has been shown to be true. That person's identity doesn't matter anymore.
They like to think it does. I mean, they'll send the propaganda wing into, the release the flying monkeys, and Laura Ingraham will come, blasting out of the castle after that guy. But I mean, just like she did after this.
Saying that he might, he might, because he was born in Ukraine.
Yeah.
Therefore, he might be a double agent.
Right? Yeah.
Which I'm like, oh my God.
They are the worst people in the world.
And he's Jewish, which I'm waiting for the anti-Semitism to come out and say, well, of course he's a Jew. What do we expect? I mean, they're looking at everything, and I mean, they're kind of approaching that. I can feel almost they want to say something about that, but
dancing right up to it, they can't quite say it.
So you look at the poll numbers and where people are with this. It's pretty much 50% of the people saying, "Hey, impeachment and removal."
Right.
That's a big number. Again, it took a long time to get voters there when Nixon was facing this kind of thing. But, when John Dean got up there and said, this is what happened, everybody's like, uh-oh.
Yeah.
So this actually did go down.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, when and we'll see about this base. You know, we keep hearing it's 40-some%. I think it's much smaller. I really, really do. I don't. You know, and I need to get out more, and maybe I haven't been south of the Mason-Dixon line for a while. But I mean, I have a really hard time believing that the same. I mean, the cognitive dissonance in the head of some of these people, you know, who have to say, "Oh, it's I'm pro-life, and this is so important to me, and we need all this other stuff," and then to have this guy as their standard.
Their vessel. I mean, he's basically a vessel.
When Mike Pence is waiting in the wings, and they could. I mean, they could broom him and Trump and have Mike Pence step in, and then the cognitive dissonance would die down. But then we'd have Mike Pence as a president.
Right. Who Mike Pence is a believer in Mike Pence is really an ideologue as opposed to Trump, who's really not. I mean, you really can't pinpoint what the guy stands for.
Well,
except
he
Trump.
doesn't like taxes. We know that because he announced this morning via Twitter that his permanent residence is going to be moved to Palm Beach. He's no longer going to be a New Yorker.
He's a Florida man now.
He said that's going to be 5 years from now is what he said. Now, we'll see about that. Yeah. But he might be making plans for sooner than that. You never know. But he just said, I'm not going. And Andrew Cuomo, his response was, good riddance. It's not like he paid taxes here anyway. So that's going to be interesting to see. But, there's all this other stuff that's going on around here that we keep forgetting about, right? We're focused on the impeachment inquiry, but there's other stuff. You're starting to learn some more about Rudy Giuliani and those buddies he was hanging out with.
You thought we're coming locally.
No, but I mean, we're learning a lot more about what those guys were doing and some of the deals that they were trying to make. These were real winners. These guys they arrested at the airport with their one-way tickets.
Yeah, with their one-way tickets.
Igor.
Yeah. I mean, this is going to get ugly.
I know.
And it's going to be interesting to watch. I mean, I would rather we were not here. This is not a place that I'd want to be. Look, I don't like the president or his policies. Never have. But typically, you want the president to do a decent job. You want the country to be okay. I can't look past this stuff, though. I'm really struggling with this. This is not something that you take lightly, and it's not something you do just because you don't like a guy. I didn't like George Bush. I never said he should be impeached.
I didn't. Well, and it's I never liked the president either, but I really don't want him living in my head anymore. I mean, it is a bet. He is the worst possible house guest. I can tell you right now. He sits around in his underwear. It's disgusting. Anyway,
all right.
Sorry.
All right.
Well, let's.
I was going to say that.
Go ahead, please.
I'm waiting for the really conspiracy theories to come out. That the two guys who were arrested happen to be Jewish, so it's part of the whole Jewish conspiracy. The guy in the White House, he's a Jew. They're a Jew. It's all the Jews that are trying to get Trump out.
We used to encourage Soviet Jews to emigrate.
Right.
They were like the model minority. They came over here with their educations and their big brains.
Well, look, this guy. I mean, served in the service. I mean, he's obviously very bright guy.
Naturalized, absolutely.
And now he's a traitor, of course.
Well, that's double agent. Agent.
And for John Yoo and Laura Ingraham, two of the most despicable people in the world, to be talking like this, it's just like, I mean, it's never mind. I guess the money is really good working there. So
let's talk about another investigation. This one a little close to home. Gary Jones, UAW president, in some serious trouble. The Fed's now suggesting that he was
not Jewish, though.
Trying to embezzle as much as $700,000 in member dues. That's what the Detroit News is reporting. It's on Deadline Detroit right now. Yeah, is that wrong? So that's the whole thing. Wait, this goes on all the time. Get over it, right? Are we supposed to just get over it?
Is that wrong?
Yeah, it's wrong.
Yeah,
it's wrong if indeed
wrong.
If indeed he did this, and obviously these are allegations. There's going to be a trial and all this kind of stuff. But wow, this is a little bit.
He has not been charged.
Bit deeper than they thought.
He's not been charged with that. There's just an implication in the.
He's been named in one of his aides was charged.
Yes, a guy named Nick Robinson,
and he is a UAW official. I believe,
and
the Fed
Detroit News
said,
have
the Feds have said that's.
I have to say, when I was on strike at the Detroit News, the UAW was at the front lines. They were giving us money every holiday. The UAW was revered as the model, not only socially progressive, but also that they could shut down in operation, and that they had the muscle to do that stuff, and they were a very effective union, and they still are an effective union. But it's clear that the corruption is so systemic, and it's so disgraceful. And for me, being a very pro-union person, it's painful because it only provides fodder for people to say, "Oh my gosh, the crooked unions." And I've had, in the newspaper guild, a very positive experience with unions, but
I agree. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, they were always the model union, right? They were the they were not the
clean
Teamsters.
union, right?
They were not the Teamsters.
Right.
So.
Well, I mean, interestingly enough, they have had a pretty good month. I mean, that 30-day strike against GM, 40 days. Was it that long?
40 days.
Yeah, it was long.
Yeah.
Either way, the union got a pretty good deal on that one. Now, granted, the socialist newspaper here in town suggested that it was a sellout by the UAW and that their members got screwed. I disagree. I thought it was a pretty good deal for them.
$15,000 screwing, It's like just so.
Vegas.
Yeah.
There you go. But, so they've had, and they settled with Ford in like just a couple of days. Chrysler's next. That's going to be done pretty soon. Not a bad month for them, but if I'm Gary Jones, I'm starting to polish the resume. Because I have a feeling as soon as these deals are done, he's likely be broomed
from a resume. I would be looking for a good
lawyering
attorney.
up
Well, I'm sure he's got one. I'm sure he's got one of those already.
1-800 call Steve Fishman.
Yeah, so he does have a lawyer already, as a matter of fact.
He does.
Who refused to comment for that Detroit news story.
Okay.
Again, you can read more about it at deadlinedetroit.com. Yeah. All sorts of good stuff is there. Yeah, it's a tough one. And if I'm rank and file, I'm liking that bonus. But at the same time, I'm a little ticked off because, what are my dues being used for?
Right. Cigars. I mean, this is what always, I guess I'm just a born screenwriter at heart. But I mean, I always think about like the details of these these petty, this isn't petty theft, this is grand theft. But I mean, the stuff that they're buying with all these ill-gotten gains, cigars, steaks, luxury vacations. It's like, come on, guys.
The only thing that would make it better is if they bought Trump steaks.
Yeah. Get an offshore,
or Trump
get an
vodka.
offshore bank account, stash it there, silently slip out of town, and go live like a king.
Yeah, I mean it's terrible. I can't remember. I think I was paying $70 a month for union dues in D.C. And had I known the union was spending it that way, I'd be extremely upset.
Look, I was a UAW member most of my years at WDET. Okay. Non-management full-time employees are all UAW. Okay. Professional administrative, 1979 is the chapter.
Wow.
And that was a very weird situation. So I paid my dues. I never really...
Yeah.
We were lumped in with all the IT workers at the university and a couple of other people that were part of that union, and I was the only one in the union that did my job. They actually blocked raises for me several times because they were worried that if I got a raise, then it would screw up their relationship with the university on other things.
Really?
And so I had to leave. I had to get out of the union.
Huh.
And I did.
Did you leave under were you cashiered out?
No, not necessarily. We created a new position that was actually management, therefore I couldn't be in the union anymore.
Okay,
so,
got it. All right.
Yeah, moving up the chain, moving up the ladder at that point in time in my life.
Okay.
Back when, that was still possible. I kid. But anyway, long story.
Gary Jones.
He's in trouble.
He's in big trouble. Yeah.
Let's talk about another company that is in a little bit of trouble. Founders Brewery.
Oh my God!
They finally settled the lawsuit against the lawsuit that Tracy Evans brought against them. And full disclosure, Tracy Evans used to do some work here at Deadline, correct?
Right. He was on the show, The Trip.
The relationship show. Yeah.
So just want to put that out there. But they finally settled the case. I've learned a little bit about it that I can't really get into yet. Hopefully, I will have somebody from Founders on the program in the next few days. I'm working on that to get their side of what's going on and find out a little bit more. But, I mean, they handled this.
Make sure they bring a six-pack.
They handled this pretty poorly from a PR standpoint.
Pretty poorly? And that's one way of
you've got bars all over town that are dropping their product. And Founders is one of those breweries that, they make really, really good beer if you're a beer drinker. And I know a lot of people that absolutely love the stuff. They closed down their Detroit restaurant indefinitely because they were worried about the safety of their employees, but in reality, they didn't want people picketing outside the restaurant every day.
Sure.
Like I said, the settlement is something that probably couldn't happen until now.
I don't know. I think I would have settled the day after that deposition was.
Well, but it depends. It depends on what both sides are looking for, right? and what's a reasonable number, and that's stuff that attorneys hash out. So without knowing all the details around there, it's tough for me to sit there. Oh, they should have settled this months ago. Except I'm not privy to enough details to know whether or not they could have done better on the settlement in terms of the timing. But the fact that that deposition took place the way that it did, I was talking to Fishman about this last week on the show, and he put the blame squarely on the lawyers. He said, look, sometimes lawyers go into a deposition, they say, don't give an inch on any question, never admit to anything, don't do anything, stonewall, stonewall. And if that's the advice they got,
that was bad advice.
Well, you have to interpret that advice correct, and it sounds like that person did not interpret it properly.
But his lawyer was allegedly sitting next to him. And
right. She let
you can answer that question.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. You can say we'll stipulate that he's black. We're not going to get into an argument here. I think one of the grave errors here was that they were so certain they could win the case on the merits and say we fired him because. Well, meanwhile, they ignored, and we've talked about this, they ignored all the allegations about racism. They pretended as if those didn't exist, and they said, oh, we fired him for good cause, ignoring all that. And you can't, it was just so poorly handled.
Right, it really was. And they could have, I had a conversation with a PR guy earlier this week. I was going to write about it, but it's kind of been overtaken by events. And the whole concept of crisis public relations. You know? And I mean, we're all old enough to remember what I think of as sort of the cornerstone case of crisis PR, which was the Tylenol murders. And they were the first. I mean, Johnson & Johnson was probably one of the first to practice the strategy of radical transparency, right? They came out and they said, this has happened to us. Obviously, we've been targeted by a mad person. We're going to, we want to win your trust back. We're going to pull all of our products. We're going to wait until, we're going to institute all these new measures. And they came out of it smelling like a rose. I mean, there's nobody who's afraid to take Tylenol now. And, they could have, but this one, I actually dropped a note to Tracy because we're Facebook friends. I said, this is like watching a man run out of a burning building with his hair on fire. Step on a rake, smack himself in the face, then stumble into a buzzsaw, and then bounce into a pond, and that was, and it was that bad. So they just really screwed it.
It was
they did
very very poorly executed.
And the question is, what's the way back for them?
Well, weren't they just
because their
sold?
Diversity officer just left.
Yeah,
she's like, hey, they were
left.
more interested in the optics of my face than the sound of my voice, which is a great statement, first of all. But it speaks volumes about whether or not they took this seriously. Right. And so they're going to have to actually show that they actually do give a damn about this.
Wasn't Founders... my husband works in the business department over the Detroit News, and he's like, I know they just were sold. And I looked it up, and I think just a few days
San Miguel,
before this broke...
the brewing,
they
company.
sold something like a 90% stake in this. Well, I don't know if the money has changed hands or not, but I mean... if I were the buyer of this, I'd be like,
no, you take it back.
It's like, talk about a bum steer.
Absolutely. Well,
the way to come back, I mean, there's going to have to be a lot of goodwill, and it'd be interesting to see what how Tracy Evans is out there and what kind of deal if he comes around, or I mean, clearly they need to address the racial allegations there, and if in fact there was some of that, the allegations prove true, then people need to leave. People need to be fired, and they need to announce it. They need to say, we've had a culture here that apparently, it slipped out of our hands or whatever, and we didn't realize it, although they may have, and not recognize it. He obviously made allegations, and they can say we handled them wrong. I mean, they have to be as forthright and as transparent as possible. And if they want to BS people, they're in for a longer ride back to reality. And I think it's interesting when people like that become so successful in business. I think it gets to their heads, and they think whatever they decide.
I'm a beer maker.
They lose sight of reality, and they decide we are determining reality when in fact there's another reality out there, and they got bit by that reality.
Let's stay on the bad PR side for just a little bit, because another institution that has been dealing with bad PR in the last couple of years is Michigan State University. Another high-profile departure. Nancy Schlichting, who of course was the CEO at the Henry Ford Health System, was appointed to the MSU Board of Trustees to replace George Perlis. She has extensive managerial experience in a large institution. She knows what she's talking about. But she said, look, they talked about this radical transparency, and clearly they weren't putting their money where their mouth was.
Right.
She said, I can't do this. I'm not going to do this. And she was attacked by MERS, the Michigan Information Research Service, by the way, up in Lansing.
Gobsmacked by that.
Yeah,
I read that in Brian
They're
Dickinson's...
like, she's not a Spartan.
Yeah.
That's exactly, you don't need a loyalist in that situation. You need somebody that is disconnected, that's going to fix stuff.
That is how they got into this mess, is by
Spartanation.
Circle the wagons,
exactly.
That's not what you need.
I know. And I don't see MERS on a regular basis.
It's a very expensive subscription.
I know, it's expensive subscription. Anyway, I listen to their podcast, and if they bring this up on their podcast, I'm just going to hit the roof. But anyway, and for them to insult her like that, maybe she'd be happier at
Cornell
or Colgate or wherever she went.
So basically, are they trying to say that Michigan State is not an elite school?
Yeah, right.
Because I'm sorry, that's not good either, because you're saying, hey, we're dumber than Cornell. Michigan State has worked really hard to build their research institution status, and it's a good school.
Yes.
And don't sit there and say, well, she's from Cornell, she doesn't understand
She's
us.
a snooty bitch. Right, yeah, exactly.
She's really smart, and she did a great job at Henry Ford for a long time.
Sterling reputation.
It's a classic case of institution protecting the institution
it's the Catholic
at
Church
the
all
cost
over again.
of the people they serve.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And we see it play out in all the different institutions, from religious institutions, and we see it particularly played out in universities. We saw it at Penn State. We're seeing it here. And look, the University of Michigan has not been totally, above board on everything they deal with. And so,
I would hope they would have enough sense to not do it this way.
Well,
but who knows?
I see Nancy as somebody, and I've interviewed her several times. I've known her for a long time. She would not have just done this because she just, I don't feel like doing this anymore. No. For her to step down, this is a pretty significant move.
She was obviously running into some sort of wall there, and it's just, and when that happens, I think it would be interesting for her to kind of go into a little more detail about this. I know she's discreet and she's politic and she plays the game, but she's also retired, and this is a public institution, and they are suffering great damage from this, and I think people care about it.
And don't worry.
Now you have the ex-president who's going on criminal trial. I mean, it's like the bad publicity just keeps on coming. And I mean, how horrific is that for the image of the university that the president is on trial? I mean, it's good for the justice system.
Your diploma is worth less today than it was.
That's right.
4 years ago.
I want a little.
Well, and speaking of the University of Michigan, big announcement that was made the other day that they want to build this innovation center in downtown Detroit on the site of the old fail jail, as we call it. Instead of having razor wire around, we might have an office building, which would be interesting. They, of course, don't have the funding for it yet, but if Stephen Ross is involved, I have a feeling that that's going to come. Dan Gilbert's involved. So a couple of billionaires and the University of Michigan, which has an endowment worth, a couple billion?
I think it's more than that.
It's a few $1 billion. $12 billion or something like that. So I have a feeling they'll get the money for this. But, I mean, what do you think about the University of Michigan invading Detroit?
I think it's
they've already invaded Detroit.
Well, they've been here for a while.
They've got
a place
their
on Woodward for quite a while.
Yeah,
it's still there.
I think that's great. I am always so amazed how the city of Detroit makes announcements of deals when they're not done. It's like I think we were talking about this the other day when the Pistons announced that they were moving downtown at a big press conference, and they had the NBA commissioner there, and Duggan starts talking and saying, well, it still needs to be approved by this board, and the commissioner looks and says, you mean this isn't approved yet? Kind of like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
And and Charlie brings up, LaDuff has written a column basically saying, hey, they're making this grand announcement. They don't have the money. The Ford plant, or not the Ford, the Chrysler plant, where they hadn't had all the land acquisitions, and it was all contingent on that. They made the announcement, the celebration, we're doing that. I'm amazed. I mean, they've been lucky enough for all those things to come through, but I find it a little bit of an odd way to
isn't there
go about
a very
I think
long
somebody
history?
knows something that they have not made public yet about this kind of stuff.
Isn't there also a long history in this town of people announcing stuff that with
district
with beautiful architectural drawings that don't come to pass.
Like the Illiches. The Illiches are notorious for that.
Case in point, exactly.
District Detroit.
District Detroit. I mean,
the Uniroyal site.
Detroit.
Yeah, but I guess I trust the University of Michigan more, and Stephen Ross, whose reputation is very closely tied to that, than I do the Illiches. And I don't know. I'm with Craig. I think that with the people connected to it now, I think it's probably going to happen.
Well, okay, we've only got about a minute left. And yesterday was Halloween. Anybody wear a costume?
I did not.
I had nary a trick-or-treater, not a single one yesterday.
One? Really?
I live in this weird little street where the street next to mine has a ton of houses, right?
Yeah.
And so you go up and down 2 blocks, you can fill up a pillowcase with candy.
Sure.
Mine, you have to take a little side jog, and there's only 5 houses there. And there's no kids on my block, so nobody showed up.
Well, we had atrocious weather. We always have a ton of kids, hundreds usually, and we got maybe half that as usual, but it was still a good turnout, and I've got some leftovers though this year, which I didn't last year.
I want to get this on the record.
Yeah.
Every year I see the hand wringing from people saying, "Well, there's kids from the city coming to my neighborhood to trick or treat. Do I have to give them candy?"
Of course, yes,
you do.
Yes, you do.
Give them candy, you cheap bastards. It's not that big a deal.
It isn't.
It's not. And they're cute, and they come up and they ring the doorbell, and that's fine.
They're adorable.
That's why they're here, because they want to trick or treat.
Right.
And if they think they're going to get better candy in Grosse Pointe or Birmingham, they might. You never know.
You have to give candy. And
they're
if you
kids.
don't give candy, sit in your house in the dark and just,
exactly.
wait it out.
Curmudgeonly jerks.
Yeah.
So that's my scolding for the day. So there we go.
There we go.
There's Nancy
every year.
Pelosi.
That's right. And with that, we end the week that was. It's going to get weirder, folks, and there's going to be a lot of stuff going on. Nancy Derringer, thank you very much for being here once again.
Good to be back.
Michael Lucido, thank you for engineering the broadcast today. Alan Lengel, we always appreciate you being here as well. I'm Craig. Thanks for watching. Remember, share this with your friends. Let them know we're doing this. Also, check out Deadline TV. We got a new one up there. Ganella's Deli down in Southwest Detroit.
Up to 18 layers.
I need to get to this place. It looks pretty good. So check out that video there. It will make you want to eat lunch right now. And, of course, there will be a new zip up there as well a little bit later on today. Our own Violet will be doing that. That's always fun. Look for this to be there tomorrow on the Deadline Detroit YouTube page and also at deadlinedetroit.com. And, of course, we'll have a podcast of this up a little bit later on today. Have a fantastic weekend, everybody, and...
Hey, drive home safely.
See you later, everybody. Hey, the Craig Fahle Show on Deadline Detroit is made possible by Samaritas, which is the state's largest private foster care and adoption agency. But they do a heck of a lot more than that. They've been serving homeless families, persons with disabilities, abused and trafficked women. They're also one of the largest resettlement agencies in the state. They provide market rate and affordable housing for seniors and HUD housing for families. And they also have skilled nursing, memory care, and rehab communities in Grand Rapids, Cadillac, and Saginaw. Samaritas, thanks for their support. Great organization doing great stuff all around the state.